Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of this statement. In fact, I received it yesterday when the Prime Minister made an appeal entitled Seeking Common Ground in Parliament. And where did she make that appeal? Not in Parliament, but in a small room just down the road. Mr. Speaker, it's now clear the bold New Deal the Prime Minister promised is little more than a repackaged version of her 3 times rejected deal. The rhetoric may have changed, but the deal has not. I thank the Prime Minister for her letter. It offers no change on a customs union, no change on single market alignment, and no dynamic alignment on environmental protections. This government is too weak, too divided to get this country out of the mess that they have created. For over 2 years, the Prime Minister bullishly refused to consult the public or Parliament. She did not seek a compromise until after she had missed her own deadline to leave. And by the time she finally did, she had lost the authority to deliver. That became evident during the 6 weeks of cross-party talks that ended last week. Talks that were entered into constructively on both sides to see if a compromise was possible. But, Mr. Speaker, while those talks are going on, Cabinet Minister after Cabinet Minister made statements undermining what their colleagues in the room were offering. The Foreign Secretary, Leader of the House, International Trade Secretary and Treasury Chief Secretary all made clear they would not tolerate a deal which included a customs union. While Tory leadership contender after Tory leadership contender took it in turns to make it absolutely clear that any compromise deal would not be honoured. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, no matter what the Prime Minister offers, it's clear no compromise would survive the upcoming Tory leadership contest. The multiple leaks reported from the Cabinet yesterday show the Prime Minister couldn't even get the compromise deal she wanted through her own Cabinet. And it's clear that the shrunken offer that emerged satisfied no one. Not her own backbenchers, not the DUP, and, Mr. Speaker, not the official opposition either. No Labour MP can vote for a deal on the promise of a Prime Minister who only has days left in her job. And even if the Prime Minister could honour her promises, the deal she is putting before us does not represent a genuine compromise. Her 10-point plan is riddled with contradiction and wishful thinking. Firstly, the Prime Minister pretends she's delivering something new with a temporary customs union. This isn't a compromise, it's just accepting the reality. Under the withdrawal agreement, we will already be in a temporary customs union through the transition period, which can last for up to 4 years. And if not, we will enter the backstop, which in effect keeps us in a customs union too, without any say. Secondly, why would this House legislate for a plan which has already been comprehensively rejected by the European Union? The government wants to align with the European Union on goods to keep frictionless trade, while at the same time wants to pursue trade deals which would undermine this process. It's simply not compatible. The technology they need to continue to pursue their Chequers plan simply doesn't exist. It's already been ruled by the EU as illegal, impractical, and an invitation to fraud. And, Mr. Speaker, the government has failed to provide any economic analysis to show this would make us better off. Why would the House support such a chaotic and desperate approach? Labour set out a sensible compromise plan over a year ago, including a comprehensive and permanent customs union with the EU that gives us a say, that would allow us to strike trade deals as part of the world's biggest trading bloc, bring investment while maintaining the highest standards. It's credible and achievable. and the best way to protect industry, manufacturing and jobs, something this government is woefully indifferent to, as the latest crisis in the steel industry shows today. The government must be prepared to step in and take a public stake to save thousands of high-skilled jobs at British Steel, a foundation industry for any major economy. Instead, the Tory obsession is for striking trade deals with the likes of Donald Trump. They prioritise chlorinated chicken, further NHS privatisation and deregulation over protecting supply chains and jobs in this country. On workers' rights, Mr. Speaker, we have yet to see the full package the government intends to bring forward. But many in the trade union movement remain very sceptical. As Frances O'Grady of the Trade Union Congress said yesterday, and I quote, "This reheated Brexit deal won't protect people's jobs and rights." On environmental protections, it's clear the Prime Minister is not offering dynamic alignment, and that under her proposals, the United Kingdom would fall behind in a number of areas, with only a toothless regulator under the control of the Environment Secretary in place of binding international commitments to protect our environment. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of a confirmatory vote, I'm sure nobody here will be fooled by what the Prime Minister is offering. Will the Prime Minister tell us now if this offer is genuine? Will she give her party a free vote on this issue, or will she, as before, whip against a confirmatory referendum? If the government truly believes this is the best deal for the economy and for jobs, they should not fear putting that to the people. Mr. Speaker, for too long our politics has been sick. It means vital issues are being neglected, the crisis in our schools and hospitals, the housing crisis and the cruelty of the social security policy and universal credit. Our country needs leadership to bring us together. However, this Prime Minister is not the person to do that. Throughout the last 3 years, she's made no attempt to unite the country. She's been focused only on keeping her divided party together, and it hasn't worked. And her time has now run out. She no longer has the authority to offer a compromise and cannot deliver. That's why it's time for a general election to break the Brexit deadlock and give the country a say.
Prime Minister!
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I think the game was actually given away by the right honourable gentleman when he made it absolutely clear that, as far as he is concerned, the way to get this through the House is for everybody else to compromise to his plan and only his plan. In his statement, he was very clear that he was not making any proposals to compromise. The government has indeed compromised. We have recognised that there are issues on which this House will need to decide, and that is the plain fact. There are different opinions across this House on the two key issues of the future customs arrangement and the second referendum. I've made my position very clear on these. The government has set out its position, but it is for this House to decide, and the best vehicle to do this is within the Withdrawal Agreement Bill. So then this House can finally make its mind up as to what it wants the future customs arrangement to be, and as to whether it thinks there should be a second referendum. He talks about free votes on a second referendum. Well, of course, in the indicative vote process that went through, we did indeed give Conservative members a free vote on this issue, and the second referendum was rejected across the House. He talks about he has some inaccurate comments. He talked about the environmental regulator. It will be an independent body which is able to hold the government to account on the issue of environmental standards. I think he showed his blinkered view on trade when what he sets out is, as far as he seems to be concerned, the only issue, the only people he wants to trade with are European Union. Actually, what we want to see is a good trade deal with the EU and good trade deals with other countries around the world. That is the best way forward for the United Kingdom. And he talked about British Steel, and I've answered in response to questions in PMQs on British Steel and what the government is doing. He talks about the Labour position of wanting a comprehensive customs union and of wanting all that dynamic alignment and that single market. I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that what the Labour Party wants to achieve in its relationship with the EU would make it even harder for a British government to take action to protect industries like the steel industry. He himself has always complained about state aid rules, but he would be wanting to tie himself into those state aid rules by what he is proposing for the future. But then, of course, what we see, he talks about different opinions. He talks about different opinions across this House. Of course, the one issue that has never properly been resolved in this House, and which the Withdrawal Agreement Bill would force to be resolved in this House, is whether the right honourable gentleman himself is for Brexit or against it. If he is for Brexit, he will vote for the Withdrawal Agreement Bill. Voting against the Withdrawal Agreement Bill is voting against Brexit.